Hi everyone, welcome to the Friday Night Record Club, and today we have a good friend of mine. His name's Robert Davison. So Rob, thank you for coming along.
My pleasure. Thanks for coming along to my house.
Yeah, well, exactly. So I've actually come to his place. We're just setting up here, and we're going to just have a little discussion about some pieces of music that Rob likes. Now, I might just find out a little bit more about you, Rob. Tell me a bit of your story. And I think maybe we know each other for quite a long time, but you can start off with that, but maybe go into what you've been, what you do and what you've been doing. So, Rob, tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, we knew each other when we were teenagers, you and I, through the youth group at the Gap Uniting Church and some other sort of church situations and around bands. We were both in bands in the 80s. I was playing in bands, but I was also studying classical music. I started classical composition quite late, actually classical music in general quite late, when I first moved to Brisbane from Canberra in grade 11. And my teachers were wonderful, Catherine Trent, Denise Jones. They got me onto the confidence that I could actually be creative with my love of music. I had a fantastic classroom teacher at the grammar school. I'd been in Canberra before that at Belconnen High School. I also had great teachers there with the choir and things like that. So I was involved in the choir, and I'd had some piano lessons. My piano teacher when I was quite young, Mrs. Hastings, who also helped me a great deal. And in fact, what I used to do is play, say Bach or Beethoven pieces for children, but I kept spicing them up with my own harmonies and my own little changes of melody. And the teacher said, "What the heck are you doing?" And I said, "Well, this is how I like it." And she said, "Maybe you should write some music." So when I was 9 years old, she got me to write my first piece of music, and encouraged me. But then I stopped doing piano because I complained that I didn't like all the practice, and my parents just said, "Okay, well, you don't have to do it." So I didn't do it. But then I did get back into music at 17, having played in bands, punk bands and things. But I really got into classical music, and I had a wonderful double bass teacher, and I practiced very, very hard, and I quite soon had a job playing in the Queensland Symphony Orchestra, and I got into study music at the University of Queensland.
You did skip something. When you were 17 or 16, you won an award, didn't you?
Well, that's actually, my music teacher, Denise Jones, encouraged me to write a piece for orchestra.
Yeah.
And I entered it into the ABC competition. I won the prize, much to my surprise, and the Queensland Symphony Orchestra played the piece. I was blown away, and I've been doing it ever since.
Right. You've also, Rob, you've had a recording device that you've used for a long time, and otherwise known as a foreign thing called a cassette player. Well, how old were you when you first got your first cassette player?
I think we got our first cassette when I was 6, when we were in England, and we used to go around recording our voices. I've got tapes of myself at 6, which actually I've used in some of my more recent compositions. Yeah, so the tapes, I've actually recently dug out crates of my old cassettes and digitized almost all of them now. I've got a few left to do. But it's great because I've got the voice of my mother who died many years ago in 1988. I've got the voices of other relatives who've passed on, my grandparents, my uncle, these sort of people, and also lots of people who I interviewed. I actually went to the States in the 90s. I studied composition with Terry Riley in 1995, and I went around and I interviewed a whole lot of composers, and I've got their voices, and people like Glenn Branca, who've died since, Jeremy Payton Jones, a whole lot of people. And a lot of my heroes like, Michael Nyman, Gavin Bryars, Harold. I didn't actually record it. Yeah. Harold Budd I didn't record. I had a really nice lunch with Harold Budd. He's passed on now. Mm. Lots of these people who died. And another very important thing I should mention is also that after that trip in 1995, I came home and I started an ensemble, Topology, which I've just been on tour with today. Last night we did a gig. So that group's continued to go. So music has been my life, and cassettes have been an important part of it.
Yeah. Okay, so you're primarily, you're a double bass player.
Yeah.
But you were a composer. And do you also, you just manage, you said a few other things. What other things do you do, Rob? You said, you kind of, like in a daytime in your job at the moment, what would you spend your time doing mostly?
Well, I actually got a job in the place that I studied. I feel like I just went a few feet from where I was as a teenager studying music at the University of Queensland. I now teach there, having done a lot of other things in between, like I played in the Sydney Symphony Orchestra, and I did play a lot of double bass. I had full-time jobs with that, and also composing. I see myself primarily as a composer who plays the double bass sort of as a job, but I also teach as a job. I had my daughter, I got married, we had a child, Julia, and then I realised I needed to have more of a secure income. I started off actually doing computer programming at that point, but then the opportunity came up at QUT to have a music lecturer job. I took that, not expecting to get it again, and then moved over to UQ, where I currently teach. And in that job, I teach songwriting, improvisation, composition, music history, music theory. I love all that. I just love it. I love the teaching. And I get to spend part of my job in the same way as a scientist would spend some of their time doing research. I do some of my time writing music and also, playing music. So it's great.
I know it's a hard question to answer, but so you do a lot of things, and like a lot of us do, but do you enjoy the most? What do you get? What really excites you the most out of all of those things, the many caps you wear, Rob Davison?
Well, it really is when I finish a new piece, and I'm happy with it.
Composition.
Yeah. When I write a piece and I've written it, I used to say it's having written the piece, like authors say, having written the book, because it can be hard work. But these days I actually quite enjoy the process of writing music. It's quite fun. I think it's because I used to have all this pressure I put on myself of, it's got to be really good and everything. And now I just say, I got to trust the muse. I don't have to put everything out, and I might write a piece which I'm not in the end happy with, but I actually don't put pieces out unless they really move me. And then I find that the audience is moved. But if you trust the process, it's just less stressful. And I actually enjoy doing it. I was doing quite a lot of, just on the tour bus on the way back today, and I wrote quite a lot of music just sitting on a bus with my laptop. And I like that. So composing is my favourite thing, I've got to be honest. I do love seeing my students thrive, but I am a composer primarily.
You just recently... you've been cleaning out underneath your house, and you told me you made a bit of a discovery in a box. You said, do you remember what you were talking about the other night?
Yeah. Yes.
What was inside that box, Rob?
A whole bunch of old letters from my years of being teenage, early 20s, mid-20s, up to about mid-20s. So it's good. And I've got all these letters from my mum, who died, as I said, back when I was very young. And so I've got some of that, and my grandparents. I like the time travel aspect of things like tapes, letters, photographs, films, and I think you do, Tim, as well. And I think it's because you can time travel. I love the time travel, I really do. And you can go and be with people who are no longer here.
Yeah, well, I guess that was my next question. What does that do for you? You just said it, I guess. It's like time travel. Because I love going back and looking at all the bits and pieces of myself. And you and I both have that. But I guess I'm a little bit more interested in the letters you said you spoke about your mum dying. How old were you when your mum died?
I was 22, I think. Yeah, 22. And so I say I was very young, but I felt very young. Mm. Yeah, well, I have all these letters from the weeks after that period, and I guess I was really embracing life in a big way and really doing a lot. But I think that part of it was also just a sort of coping mechanism. I was just throwing myself into things to avoid some of the introspection, which, I was doing introspection when I read those letters, but I also was avoiding feeling the pain. I think it was just too much to lose your mother, who I loved so much. And I was getting very involved romantically, chasing, having various girlfriends. And I think that was, in a way, trying to chase some security as well, And I got married quite quickly after that, within just a year, a little bit over a year. Yeah. So did my siblings as well. They both two of them got married also very quickly after my mum died, as did my father himself. So, we all rushed into a secure situation.
Wow. So I guess I'm thinking losing a mum at 22, that's pretty young. I mean, I think it's young. And of course, I've also had a similar experience myself a couple of years later after you. And I kind of go, and I'm kind of curious when I think about it with myself. Well, I lost my mum at 24, and how has that affected or contributed or to your music and your creativity? I don't know. Is it? I mean, yeah. Do you know what I'm saying? The question is this: how has that death affected you creatively?
Oh, well, in so many ways. I mean, I think I actually sort of discovered this about 3 or 4 years ago, that all of my pieces since then have had a certain melancholy about them and a belonging, and I'm sure it's a grieving for my mum. There's often joy and, aggressiveness and energy in the pieces, but there's very often a longing sense, and I think it's missing my mum. I actually have written explicit pieces in memory of my mum as well. Like just I clearly knew that they were, but so many other pieces as well have got that sense. Yeah.
Do you ever with your mum? I don't mean to harp on a bit, but I mean that's something I always think as an artist, having a parent die. Does that? Do you still have dreams about it?
Yes, I do. I regularly have dreams where, I encounter her and she reassures me and says, "You don't have to worry so much," And it's when I heard Paul McCartney on that time where James Corden was driving him around Liverpool, and he was talking about his song. Did you see that? The carpool karaoke.
I saw it right over, but I didn't actually see it. No.
Anyway, he was talking about Let It Be, and he said that it was exactly that happened to him. He was in the middle of the Beatles pretty much looking like they were going to break up, which they did quite soon afterwards when they were doing that actual Peter Jackson stuff. The documentary of Peter Jackson's put together recently of Let It Be. Get Back, it's called. Hours and hours of footage of the Beatles twiddling around and making the album Let It Be, and also a lot of the songs from Abbey Road and also from their early solo albums. They were very productive in that time in January 1969. Anyway, at that time, Paul McCartney was freaking out a bit because he's thinking, the Beatles are breaking up and what am I going to do next? And this is my whole identity. And he had dreams of his mother Mary, her name was Mary, coming to him and saying, "Let it be," quite literally in the dream, "Let it be," reassuring him. So that song means a great deal to me. I have dreams where I go to the place in the Gap where we used to live and things, and she'd be down at the creek and I'd go up and she'd just, "Oh, hi, Rob," and then she could tell I was all worried about something and she'll just reassure me and think, "You don't have to worry, it's fine, it's really going to be fine." Yeah.
So it's not exactly, in your dreams, it's not a sad thing.
No.
It's not even a poignant thing, it's more of an encouraging thing. So do you think your mother, when she was alive, she was actually somebody who had was she the encourager of your parents? Do you think of your music journey and creativity, or was it something else?
Oh, well, I mean, I think both parents encouraged me, but she was certainly an encourager, and she certainly was someone I feel empathised a lot, and she could understand. She could relate emotionally very well. Yeah. She was quite anxious in many ways, but I feel like when I see her in the dream, she's lost that anxiety. She's really just at peace. Yeah, and that's really reassuring. I mean, I have to be honest, I think it's actually not just a dream. I actually think it's a real encounter with my mum. So that's going into some, areas of non-science, but I think, it's what I think, yeah.
And both you and I have been lapsed atheists, as you call it, at some point. And I think it's actually good to actually talk about it, because we are talking about a person, there's many parts to us, and I think that both you and I have been through that journey. But yours was more recently, and in this last 6 or 7 or 8 years, you had a turnaround. You had experience it, you said. Well, Can
It's actually more like it's coming up for 10 years. It's 9 years. Beginning of 2013. I had a very strong mystical experience of which is incredibly hard to talk about. It's because you can't talk about it. It's just you have to really go through it. And people who have had similar experiences really know what you're talking about. And that is of feeling totally at peace, feeling totally accepted, loved by what I kept sort of thinking in words at the time. I had about 5 hours of just lying down and feeling this sense of total surrender, and I was crying, and and I felt the worst.
Sweet tears.
Yeah, they were, and I felt like I was being hugged by God, and also, what was the other thing? It was just totally there's nothing to worry about. Basically, you can be completely at peace. I had another way of saying about it, but I've forgotten now. But yeah, that was a very strong experience. Oh, another thing was like, I remember this from when I was 3 years old. This is the same feeling as being 3 years old.
Wow.
Or the same as being 9 years old, or different times where I've actually had. I feel pretty sure that I definitely did at 9 have that same sort of experience. And I had it again just New Year's Eve of 2021. So that was a great thing to have. Just that same sort of sense of really belonging to everything, which I think is what the mystics are talking about when you read mystical, and not like across the world, like Ram Dass, Buddhists and Christians, Hindus, Muslims, Rumi. A lot of Rumi's poetry is very similar to that, or St. Francis, or St. John of the Cross, or Meister Eckhart, and I find it's really amazing to read that and think, oh yeah, wow. Or Dalmay Barton, my Aboriginal friend, who was very mystical and very connected, I think, with the whole cosmos.
It's, I guess, when you say that, and I think about myself, who loves writing music, and for you, I wonder, is sometimes being an artist is that where we're trying to explore and discover when we're doing and writing music? Are we trying to find another place, or are we trying to transcend? Are we trying to bring people into a space sometimes of a heavenly realm, or whatever term you want to use, depending which religion? Does that make any sense to you at all? Like, do you think that sometimes as an artist you're trying to create or find or discover or touch or have a relationship with the 99.9 of life we don't know about, the possibility of eternity or meaning in God? Do you think, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if I'm trying to do that. I mean, I feel like sometimes it happens, and it's like a spark, a little like lightning flash of it. Like, I'd love to be able to stay in that place. I think it does happen sometimes. You get this sort of sense of magic, and it can come through when you write music or listen to music, for that matter. And I love when it happens, but it might happen in really trivial sort of piece sometimes. That's what I love.
Yeah.
I love that. Like, it can happen in the most sort of banal pop song when listening to it, I think, and it's fantastic when that sense of connection. But absolutely, I mean, I love that ecstatic sense when it comes through in music, and it's something I would love to celebrate happening. I'm not sure if I deliberately do that, but at the same time, if I don't maybe get a sense of that at some point in my composition, maybe not to the sort of full extent of being one with everything, but a sense of connectedness, like you always say, feeling loved and connected. Sense of connectedness, a sense of, I don't know, magic, transcendence. I'm not trying to say it in some sort of new agey thing, but just getting outside your ego. That's a big part of it. But that can actually be while embracing the fragility of your ego as well. It's really, again, words. If we could talk about it with words, we wouldn't use music. The music does it, Yeah. Okay, a piece where I am very happy, I think it does come through quite strongly, is a piece called Lost in Light of mine. Now, but if you want to know about some music that I listen to where I've had that experience, the Schubert String Quintet Adagio, which is his last piece of chamber music, and he wrote it just a few months before he died. He was a very young man, 31 years old. That is a piece of music which gets me there. And it got, I was listening to that on New Year's Eve, 2021, when I had this really strong sense of completely surrendered in love. And that music just like expanded to the size of the solar system. It was incredible. It's a string quintet with the 2 cellos in it. And it's just a gorgeous.
One of your pieces.
Yeah, that's one of the ones.
Can we have a listen to it?
Come through headphones. Oh, should we start again? This is Schubert's String Quintet, the second movement, played by the Emerson Quartet. These cello pizzicati, the plucked notes, when I was listening in this very ecstatic state, each one of them sounded like a galaxy. It just expanded hugely. Yeah. So it grew, it just expanded out there, and it felt so transcendent. It's just, I've listened to this so many times, and it always makes me cry. I can't stop it. It just really gets something in me. It's my favourite piece of music, actually.
And it's funny, Rob, I've never heard this piece of his.
Well,
I mean, it's like, I'm kind of going, I'm listening to it, but you're painting a story to him and bringing meaning. And so what are you seeing right now when you hear it right now?
Well, I'm getting that sense of it expanding out to take up so much space and embracing the world in love. It's like this, it means love to me, it really does, It means peace and tranquility. Again, like, yes, you have flaws, you have horrible troubles, there's pain, but in the end, there's the peace that passes understanding. And that's the real reality. Love is more real than death. Without wanting to sound cheesy, love conquers all. I agree with the Beatles. Love is all you need and all that sort of stuff. I agree with Burt Bacharach. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. That's another one of my mum's loved songs, so that's another song I do like.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying, as we get older, we kind of go, we're willing to name it, because it was a bit cheesy when we were younger, because in our 20s we wanted to feel we're academic, we can't mention that, But of course, now it's like we're listening to music. Now I say, don't you hear it? Don't you hear the love? And kids get it, and I was like, oh God, here he goes again. I mean, again, that's what I'm saying as artists. Isn't that what we do? That's part of what we do. We bring love to the world, in some ways, or we're allowing light and love to come through what we create in our music, and obviously for sure. But this is the same thing. He was trying to do that, I guess.
I think that's true, but we might be also just be trying to make a groovy beat, which is fun to dance to, or we might be having a joke or something. But it comes through in all of those things too, We might be trying to be clever, like Bach, he writes the most beautiful transcendent things while he's solving a puzzle, but it just can be so absolutely gorgeous. Or, like I say, Burt Bacharach writing a rather cheesy sort of tune, but it's got something transcendent. I love that Noel Coward, that cheap music has sometimes the power to really move us. So sometimes it can be really tacky sounding stuff, but it's absolutely, it's still got the magic. Even sometimes like an ad jingle can make me so emotional. I forget about it's manipulating you, but it's still got that spark in there, yeah.
And that's what we do, right? It sounds like a bad word, manipulating, but when I'm playing music, I want people to feel a certain feeling, and whether you call it manipulation, it's like I want people to love the music. I want people to connect with it, and if I make it cheesy or whether I make it sound sweet or romantic or whatever I do, I think that's okay. Sometimes we get a bit caught up in the kind of the critical culture of, we can't do that. It's just too predictable. That's just too romantic. It's just too, I don't know, as I get older, I go, bugger that. I love it. It's like.
But I think if you genuinely love it, you're not just doing it in a cold, calculated way to sort of say, oh, that'll get them going. You maybe do it, but I wouldn't trust it unless I'm being really swept away as well. I need to be swept away. If I'm not being swept away, then it's going to feel fake to me. It has to feel really real to me. Like, actually, it's a bit embarrassing to say, but these days I don't actually put a piece out of mine unless it's made me cry. My own music's made me cry, and I don't want to. That could sound a bit narcissistic, but it's really not. It's just like, because I'm like so many people said, I don't feel like I'm responsible for that music. It just, and it's all these old cliches. But it just, you're playing and it comes through. It does come through, and you can't really claim ownership of it. And that gets to this very dramatic bit in the Schubert. The darkness comes to the shadow, and the pain. That's what I love with it. This piece is just glorious because it's love in the midst of suffering and darkness and pain and hardship and sadness, loss. Yeah, it's gorgeous. And he was about to die himself.
In it.
That was beautiful, Rob. Thank you. So we are here tonight. This is Friday night record club, where we are sharing pieces that we are moved by. And one of the other questions I was going to ask you and put to you was, one of the first pieces as a child that impacted you, and which piece is that?
There were quite a few, but when I was 4 or 5, or I think I was 3, my father would sit me on his knee every night and put on one record that I would always ask for, and I still love. And it's Wendy Carlos, at that time known as Walter Carlos, Switched on Bach, which was Moog synthesizer versions of Bach.
I know, the record. It sounds a little bit tacky, but it's actually kind of cool. I kind of like it because in the 80s and 90s I couldn't listen to it, but now I can go, oh no, that was the 70s, the late 60s. That was that kind of, those sounds of the synthesizer. So how did it impact you as you're sitting on your dad's knee, and can you remember what you're feeling when you're hearing the music? Well, let's play it. Okay, so here it is. So are you going back there?
Yeah, I was 3, but we kept listening to it, and I still listen to it now. I think those sounds sound fresh as anything. I've liked them all the way through because every track of the music was played very carefully. I had to keep tuning that. These were old Moog synthesizers, completely analog. They weren't stable in their tuning. The oscillators kept drifting. They had to keep checking things that would break down. And you couldn't multi-track. They used multi-track tape, but they had to play every part separately and overdub them, and it was beautifully put together, sculpted in such a creative and beautiful way. And it brought out to me a lot of the clarity of the intricacy of Bach's music. I'm not saying I was thinking that at 3, but I think that maybe I was feeling it. And the little tiny details, like for instance, there's a section coming up, not here, where there's just a little tiny variation of a semiquave's difference. And there's these beautiful timbral shifts. It gets quite radical. And I like that. And there's some sort of almost quite ugly sounds on the bottom. So the first time it goes, but then it's got that extra little tripped note. And I definitely remember loving that as a child, like that little tiny detail. And it just, switches something.
But you were sitting in near your child at 3. You remember that at 3?
Well, I don't know if I remember at 3, but I remember pretty young. I remember, I can have the memory. I mean, who knows about your memories, but I was aware of intricacy, detail, very specific sounds,
But you also remember being on the knee of your dad, having an affection for your father and listening to music together with him.
That's right. And it might be possible he was pointing out those things at the time too, like doing a little thing on my leg or something, tapping it. But, it's the same sort of thing as I used to do with my daughter. We would listen when she was a little kid to Edgar Meyer, the bass player, and we'd listen to this thing and we'd tell a whole story about it. Instrumental music with, banjo, Bella Fleck and Mark O'Connor, the fiddler. And we'd have these pictures which we'd make and draw little hand signals, and she got inside the music. And I think that's probably what was going on when I was 3 as well.
When I was really young, and I don't mean to bring it back to me too much, but I just remember about 4 or 5, when we first moved to Brisbane, my sister Ainsley loved classical music, and she'd turn out all the lights and get us all in the living room and play Peer Gynt or Peter and the Wolf and then tell the story. Did you have experiences like that when you were a child? Did any of your mum or dad or yourself or your brothers ever do anything like that where you're trying to, having like a dream-like space of talking with music, the lights out, and really listening to music, and then telling a story to it? Was that part of your story when you were young?
Yes, but probably more through my mum playing the piano with me and telling stories while she was playing the piano to illustrate it, or playing like a Chopin piece or something and then making up stories to go with it. And maybe sort of saying in this chord, like she might just play a C minor chord and say, that's the sad chord. She'd give names to particular sonorities or, melodies and these chords. So I remember that with my mum, connected with my mum when she would play the piano. She actually did teach piano. She wasn't like a very advanced piano player or anything. She taught beginner piano. And and sometimes with my father as well, listening to records, listening to like Tijuana Brass, all sorts of what I would say is fairly cheesy music now, but also...
I remember it well.
Yeah. And also Tchaikovsky.
I had it too, by the way. My dad had it, Tijuana Brass, and as you know, James Last was the other one that I used to play over and over again. Wow.
Oh, another one was Herb Alpert from Tijuana Brass, but when he sang This Guy's in Love and those sort of things, yeah. But also, the Waltz of the Flowers, Tchaikovsky was a big one actually, yeah, when I was 5, 6. And my mum would put that record on and tell stories about the Waltz of the Flowers and the Swan Lake and all sort of, the actual, she described the ballet. Now I think we went to the ballet around that age, and I was totally, gobsmacked by how beautiful it was, yeah.
Well, we have another piece of music to share too, and thank you for that, by the way, sharing that. I haven't heard that for a very, very long time, because I think my parents did have that now. So they had the Swingle singers in that kind of era. They used to play in that kind of late 60s, early 70s era. And I think that one was one of the records that my dad brought home from school, or somebody gave him. He didn't play it much himself, but I certainly played that and Swingle singers and James Last. So anyway, look, back to you. We have another question and another one, and I want to draw us into a question about a piece of music that reminds you of your first romance.
Well, I'll think about my first one where I really fell in love, and that was when I was, 14, nearly 15. And it was a girl, Naomi, who actually lived in New Zealand, but she was visiting my very good friend Richard, who was her cousin, second cousin. And we had, she was over for the summer, and it was like that Grease story, summer loving. And I just really fell in love with her, and we could really, really hit it off at this party where a friend of mine, Cliff Armitage, was being a DJ, and he put on all sorts of music. But the one I remember that really, where we started grooving together was another one, Bites the Dust by Queen.
Yeah.
And that was talk about going into another dimension, like going into a magical space and just getting lost in a dance and in each other's, feeling in love.
So what song would you play to reflect your relationship with Naomi all that time ago? What really brings it all back for you?
Another One Bites the Dust. Another One Bites the Dust.
We should play that. So what are you remembering, Bob?
I'm just remembering being in that little humpy hall, it was as called in Canberra, having this party put on by my friend Richard, dancing, the lights, just feeling in a magical world, dancing, being with Naomi, feeling really happy.
Do you mind me asking, were you sitting beside each other, or was she holding hands or anything like that? Was it anything kind of like, was it just being each other's presence, or?
No, we were dancing. You
were dancing, okay. Wow.
And I was very attracted to her.
Another One Bites the Dust.
And I was 15 and I had hormones. So what was I, 14?
No, another one. Another One Bites the Dust. Think back into Another One Bites the Dust.
Of course, the bass line's stolen from,
Where's it stolen from?
They were recording that in the
I didn't know that.
other room. They were recording in the other room or something.
Oh.
I mean, it's great. They made their own version of it, but it's very much an influence from that track, So with the hip hop.
Oh.
No, that's the new version of it. What's it called? I'll look it up. You can't put this part in the podcast because it's all messy.
Yes. Okay. Now you pointed out, Rob.
And I absolutely loved Chic at the time. I loved Nile Rodgers and all that. I still do. And I absolutely loved. Freak Out. I mean, the thing is, we were supposed to hate disco as punks and everything in those days, but I actually loved. I loved disco at the time, even though all my friends were saying disco sucks. We're talking about 1979, 1980. I remember it. Yes, mate. We are getting old.
We are. Right. Well, the next question, and let's try and remember what it was. That's right. Now, a piece of music that brings you back, reminds you of a sad moment. A sad moment or a heartbreak or...
Well, the one that comes to mind is SOS, ABBA. And this, am I allowed to go into a fairly vulnerable
absolutely.
topic? Okay.
Absolutely.
Well,
can we put it on while you're playing?
Yeah.
Let's go there.
Okay, just so trigger warning, this is pretty full on. This song was a hit. I was 9 years old. I was going on a trip with my school to Sydney. I was very excited about this trip. We had a fantastic time. We went and saw all of the Madame Tussauds and the Opera House, and from Canberra, by the way. On the bus, on the way up, the bus driver put on this record maybe it was on the radio. Anyway, and I was just listening to this, and I just totally got absorbed into it. I just absolutely went into it like I was part of the song. And the voice of, what's the blonde's name?
Agnetha.
Agnetha's voice felt so vulnerable. And SOS, anyway. Just I looked it up I kept a diary in those days every day in the age of 9. Just the night before, I had actually been sexually assaulted by a guy, Russell Cornish, who had been sexually assaulting me for some months at that point. And this was for me a refuge. I think it was a real way of coping and getting me through to going to this music. And in fact, I really think that this song, listening to that experience and just finding it as such a solace, is what really got me into music, because it was around that time that I also started writing my own music. And I just was so I just found it was, I could lose myself in the music. And that was a way to escape the horrible reality. I told people about this sexual assault and nothing was done. And music saved me, along with, a feeling of being embraced by God, like I also mentioned earlier, through, I had this Fijian man came to our Sunday school, and he was this tall, gorgeous, sort of attractive, tall, strong, loving Fijian man. And he said, Jesus totally accepts you as you are. If you knock on the door, he'll open the door and welcome you in.
Wow. So now you have shared that with me, through our friendship, and you've been going through a whole journey with that recently. And so how did you go back there to that boy to actually create some healing and to allow yourself to, move through it again, to move beyond it? How did you go about that, Rob?
Well, for many years, I just pushed it down and minimised it and sort of explained it away. It didn't affect me, It's not that I forgot about it or anything, the experience, and it did carry on over at least 2 years, might have been 3 years of this abuse. And it really was quite intense in December of that year when I was 9 years old. We're just about to turn 10. In fact, one of the worst occurrences was on my 10th birthday, because I was being driven up to Brisbane by this man and his family, and he abused me on the trip in a tent and various things. I pushed it down, and I just thought, it wasn't a problem until it was actually that Michael Jackson Leaving Neverland show that I watched when it came out in 2018 or 19, I think it's 2019, and seeing that 9-year-old boy, Wade, what's his name, and just I could completely project myself into that, and that's right, I was only 9, and start thinking, because you start to tell yourself you're responsible for one thing. You think you're responsible, and you don't think of yourself as this little kid, and you see this little kid on the screen. And then I started to think, hang on, I think I've got some stuff from that period. I've got tapes. I listened to my own recordings of my voice at that age. Got my diary. I wrote a diary entry every day of that year. I've got letters, and I can also talk to people who, it's like, what was going on there? What happened to this guy? I also could find out about the guy, what happened to him. It turned out he went to prison for doing the same thing later, even though I spoke up, but nothing was done. And I even told the authorities some years later, and nothing was done, like Child Protection Agency. But then I found out that some years after that, he was convicted again, like in the 90s, when he abused 3 boys and went to prison. And I looked up the court case, and I went and read the transcript in the Queensland State Archives, and because he moved to Brisbane. And I needed to do that to really sort of bring the reality of it to myself. I spoke to people who knew him at the time and my family, and found out memories, read through my diary, sort of reconstructed the events, and the memories were all there. I didn't have to recover memories, but I relived them, and I remembered that bus trip and the song, and actually listening to ABBA quite a lot helped. And then listening to a whole lot of other music, which maybe sprang from that and brings back the time. So memory is an interesting thing, isn't it? Because it's not necessarily just a photographic thing, but having those documents really did, it really did happen that way. And I've got letters from my grandparents. Anyway, it's a long story, but going into the memories has really been helpful, and then working with a therapist. But music itself right now, all the way through, I think it's been a major way for me to get through, and it still absolutely is, yeah.
That was going to be my question right now. You said, so you had music help you through that situation, and you more or less answered that. But you listened to SOS. Did that trigger that? You sort of realized, that's why I really connected to that song. Was that was it this recently? Was that SOS song always on your mind, remembering that moment, or was it more of just something you discovered recently that took you right back there?
Well, no, I've known it all the way through. No, you're right. I mean, I wrote an article on ABBA in the 90s or something like that, which was published. I mean, I was sort of embarrassed about ABBA because, you weren't supposed to like ABBA for a long time. Now I feel a bit justified when I find out like Sid Vicious was a big fan and John Lennon and I've particularly with the song SOS. So it's actually a brilliant piece of music, I think. Like musically constructed beautifully. Those, Benny and Bjorn are brilliant and the singing is just gorgeous. I think it's wonderful. But no, I've known about it the whole time, but it's just that I decided to really go into it and really go inside the feeling of it. And I think when you ask how does it help, it's not necessarily that triggers the memory, but it gives me a space. I think what happened in that bus trip is that I found a space that I could be myself and I didn't have to hide and I could feel feelings. They were sort of mediated feelings which I could feel, but in a way which wasn't going to be overwhelming, because they were in this contained thing of a song. But it felt huge. It's actually like what I was saying about the Schubert, in fact. It really expanded. And and it's like this huge space you can go inside and you can live in. And I think that's what music's been for me. It's like this huge, a huge palace. And there's all these rooms. And you can go inside a room and you can live there and you can just be in there and you can safely be yourself and you can feel the emotions. But they're, like I say, they're sort of mediated. They're managed emotions. They've got a limit, or then you're not going to drown in the ocean. It's almost like a swimming pool instead of the ocean. I don't know, that's not. But yeah, like there's this oceanic emotion, but somehow you can be safe in there. You're going to be safe, but you can still lose yourself and dive fully into it. But it just expands. And I really think that sense of expansiveness was very much there on that bus trip. But I was very sad as well. I mean, and a feeling the sadness of that song. And it still gets me, gets me today and makes me feel very emotional. Yeah.
So, Rob, the last question is, what piece of music do you go to or hide in, or when you're going through a really tough or really difficult time? Can you think of any particular piece of music that really takes you there and you'd like to share?
I mean, my first answer really should be, when I went through really full-on post-traumatic stress stuff with recalling some of the abuse, I actually went through huge amounts of music. I would listen and play actually on piano, but listen to music every day for like 3 hours. And I actually organised it by going decade by decade. And I started with the decade of the 1190s, and then I went to the 1200s, the 1210s. Every day, a new decade until I got to 2020s. It was the end of 2019, so up to the end of the 2010s. But the one piece of music that I would select out of that would be a piece which was composed probably in the 1360s, perhaps even early in the 1350s. And I mean, we don't know enough about it, but I tend to connect it with the Black Death. Very interestingly, in 2019, I was really obsessed with the Black Death. I read all about it. I was over in France and, looking at where towns had been absolutely destroyed by the Black Death and how they sometimes reacted, like in Carcassonne in France, where they drove out the Jews from town because they were blaming them as, they were saying it's all your fault, scapegoating Jewish people in that town, which is horrible to think of. Like that horrible pandemic caused some horrible behaviour as well as some beautiful behaviour and some incredible music. I mean, I don't know if it was directly as a result of the Black Death, but it'd be pretty hard not to be written in the same decade as the Black Death was happening. And this is Marchot's Mass of Notre Dame, which he wrote for he was at the church in Reims in northern France. And it's got this amazing spaciousness, I'd say again. A certain I hear desperation in it. I hear a desperate cry. Here we are, desperately needy, desperately in suffering and pain. Help us, Lord. Kyrie eleison, Lord have mercy. Christ have mercy, Lord have mercy. It was the first full setting by one composer of the whole mass, actually, that we know.
Could we play that?
Yeah. Oh, sure, start again. Hang on. This recording just takes me totally into another world. Not just through time travel, but feeling connected with the people who sang this in 1360 or around there. They were people who sweated and got dirty and made love and walked around, and they were people, the same as, and it's all those centuries ago, but you feel connected with them. I do. And I love that, like the very human transcendence of this glorious music, but also desperation and pain. There's a certain joyous pain, joy which doesn't negate suffering and pain.
Do you mind me asking, where would you listen to that? Would it be in the car, in a forest somewhere, or in your library, or is there any particular place you would actually listen to that music if you're going through that kind of situation?
Mostly I would listen just on headphones going for a walk. Actually, that's when I seem to find the most effective, just along a river here, or maybe through a forest, through a bushland. But just as often I'll just be at home listening on my headphones. The main thing, I suppose, is when I listen to something like that, I do give it full attention as much as you can without falling over on a walk. But I love to get fully absorbed into it. If I really want to do something fully, then I'll do what he's talking about. I'll turn the lights off, lie down, and just let myself completely focus on every detail and go inside the music. To me, that's one of the most powerful emotional experiences. It's not the only way to listen to music, but it's a way that I absolutely love doing.
Now, there's another question about a song that reminds you of a breakup, Rob, and you're talking about Naomi. Do you want to share a bit more about that, and what song comes to mind when you remember the breakup?
Yeah, well, like after we had that summer, Naomi went back to New Zealand, and we were pen pals. We stayed in touch. We sent cassettes to each other, actually, because phone calls were very expensive in those days. Until finally I got the opportunity to go to New Zealand and visit her, and I was going to spend a month there. When I got there, I didn't realise she had a boyfriend in the meantime. But it was interesting anyway. It's a long, complicated story, but we almost sort of, it was a bit of a bizarre love triangle, let's say. And I liked the guy and everything. We actually went on this trip together. On that trip, we were listening to a lot of Bob Dylan, and there was a song on the Slow Train Coming album, which I listened to a lot after I got back home, and helped me to think tenderly of Naomi, but also to sort of move on. It was Precious Angel, which Bob Dylan wrote about a woman who, and it's a beautiful song. I think it must have Mark Knopfler playing on it. Boy, sounds someone very much like him. It's a great track. And it reminded me of that trip that we took down to Rotorua, but also, help. And it says, shine your light on me. It's like I kept thinking of Naomi shining her light on me. But it was good. A bittersweet.
Let's give that song a bit of a spin then. Right, well, we're coming down to the final a few minutes, Rob, of our little conversation. And I'm going to share a song with you, and I want to see where it takes you. And this is the song.
I mean, it just reminds me of the catching the bus home from school. I was disappointed in this song because I much preferred their earlier stuff. This is Spandau Ballet. I loved To Cut a Long Story Short, and when they went all glitzy, it was not my thing, but I like it now. But it reminds me of catching the bus home from school because I think, I don't know, it must be just on the radio or something, and it reminds, maybe someone had it on their radio.
It's 1984, by the way.
Oh, I wasn't at school then.
No, but you might have been catching a bus to uni.
Oh, I was probably catching a bus to uni. That's what it would have been, yeah. Catching the bus to uni.
And you, who was in your life at that time? Was there any girl in your life or somebody you really were thinking about? Because you would have been 18, 1984.
The annoying thing is that I know there were girls who fancied me, but I wasn't seeing the signs, and that sort of frustrates me now. But at the same time, I was very focused, very, very focused on music and composing. And I probably don't know if I had time, to be honest, for a girlfriend. Yeah, look, I don't know. I actually think that by this stage, I was less interested in popular music. I was so focused on learning classical music, and I was just absolutely burying my head in Stravinsky and Stockhausen and
Well,
I was still paying attention, but I felt like, what are those young people into these days? I preferred it when I was, 16 or 15 or something, yeah.
Well, Rob, we've come to the end of our little hour, so thank you so much for sharing with me, Rob, being a good friend you are, and in our Friday night record club. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Tim. It's been very nice to talk through these songs. But there are lots of other songs from very recently that we could have talked about, but we can't fit more than 5 in.
I think we might have to have a part 2 with you, Rob. So we'll park that in. All right. Well, thank you, Rob. Cheers.